Hi, everybody, and welcome to another Accessibility Talks, or A11y Talks, the monthly virtual meetup where we chat about digital accessibility, inclusivity, and usability. Each month, we invite a speaker to present a topic, and afterward, we invite the community to ask questions and participate in the discussion. I'm your host today. My name is Aubrey Sambor. I'm a lead front-end developer, and I use the pronouns she, her. I am a white woman with long blue-green hair and pink glasses, and I'm wearing a black shirt with a yellow cardigan. Before we dive into the talk, let's take a moment to remind everyone that our group is committed to creating a friendly and safe environment for all. We expect all participants, speakers, hosts, viewers on YouTube, and those commenting on social media to follow the Accessibility Talks Code of Conduct. This applies to all community interactions, including events, verbal questions, and chat and text channels. You can review the full code of conduct on our website at a11ytalks.com/conduct. Our goal is to foster productive dialogue where participants can share and learn from one another in an atmosphere of mutual respect. Got questions? We love questions. This year, we're now inviting viewers to submit their questions ahead of each talk so we can incorporate them into the recording session. If you have a question for our speaker, here's how you can ask. During a live stream video, type your question directly into the YouTube chat window. If you're not watching live, you can still post your questions. Add them to the comment section on YouTube or share them on LinkedIn, Mastodon, or Blue Sky. Just make sure to @ us or include the hashtag A11yTalks. That's A11yTalks. Direct links to all our social media platforms are listed on our website. We look forward to hearing from you. Huge shout out to our bronze sponsors, Agile Collective and Principal Financial Group. We appreciate your support. I also want to give a shout out to our Alley Cat Club members who donate monthly to A11y Talks and our one-time donors as well. Thank you so much for your financial contributions. Want to see you or your organization recognized as a sponsor of A11y Talks and help fund these amazing monthly meetups? Visit our sponsorship page at a11ytalks.com/sponsorship to learn more. We need your financial support to compensate our amazing speakers and to improve our live stream productions to provide the best content possible for our community. If your company uses Benevity for matching donations or gifts, you can double your contribution. Just search for A11y Talks and we should appear as A11y Talks by Midwest Open Source Alliance. All right, so today we have Suzanne Dergacheva, co-founder of Evolving Web, and she is giving her talk, When Accessibility Isn't Easy, Website Features That Need Extra Love. Really excited to hear this one. I'm really interested in hearing about features that are on websites that people might not pay attention to. So the floor is yours.
Thanks, Aubrey. So I'm going to talk today about tackling accessibility challenges. And I have to say that this talk, the content doesn't all come from me. It's from my team at Evolving Web. And I've gathered examples from across my development team working in Drupal and WordPress. And so I'm excited to share some of these top challenges today that have come up in our conversations. So for those of you who haven't met me, Aubrey did a great intro. I'm Suzanne Dergacheva. You can also email me with follow-ups at suzanne@evolvingweb.com. And I have a background in development. I've been a front-end developer. I've been shortly a designer. I used to run a training program. We covered accessibility. And I work at Evolving Web. So we're an agency that specializes in Drupal and WordPress. We have a lot of open source experience, and we work with a lot of people in a lot of clients in higher education and public sector, as well as enterprise. And so accessibility is always a priority for all our projects. And it's come up in planning projects that accessibility is something we can plan for in terms of doing QA and investing specifically in running an accessibility audit. But it's always more efficient if we think about accessibility earlier on in our projects. And so planning for accessibility has become a big focus for us, and figuring out how we can save time and how to make sure that we're planning ahead if we know that a feature is going to take more time, because we need to build in affordability into our process. And so this has led to a few trends that we've seen and a few practices that we try and implement. So first of all, for some organizations, it makes sense to introduce design systems. And I'm sure many of you going to tech conferences or design conferences, you've heard about design systems. If you're running a platform with many websites, or you're using multiple CMSs and have content across many channels, this often comes up. So here I'm showing a little bit about what a design system is for those of you who haven't heard of this concept before. It's the idea of having a strong documentation that designers and developers can use, and as well as, you know, more people at your organization can use, that really outlines what different components are going to look like in your website, but also other channels. And so a lot of big organizations invest in this, and this is a really great tool for avoiding accessibility issues, because you can test that your individual buttons, your individual components, the corresponding code, everything that you're doing is accessible. So you can test these things in advance, and then when you go to build a page or a website, you know that you're starting out with accessibility by default. Now, not every organization can invest in a design system, but the same principles apply to creating a style guide or creating a UI kit. So these are areas where we want to invest in a strong, accessible foundation. And then the other practice that we see is that when we're planning a project, when we're in a discovery phase for a project, we're often brainstorming new features. We're looking at content gaps. We're looking at new things we want to develop, or improvements that we want to make. And right at the outset of a project, we can flag things that we think will require extra attention when it comes to accessibility testing. So here I'm showing on this slide a user journey mapping exercise, which involves creating a whole bunch of sticky notes and putting them up on a virtual whiteboard. And it's often at this stage in ideation in a project where we're thinking through, okay, what are the main features and what are the main interactive elements, or what are the content components that are a little bit more complex that might require our attention when it comes to accessibility. So how can we anticipate that and plan for it? And planning for it means maybe choosing the right tools. It might mean changing how we design something. And it might mean building in more time for testing, because we just anticipate that issues will arise that we have to address and remediate. So with that said, I want this talk to be pretty hands-on. I like to show examples in all my presentations. And so the main content of today's presentation are a set of examples from projects where we have had to, find a workaround or plan a feature to make sure that it's accessible. And my first examples are in the category of navigation, because every website has navigation. I'll also include some examples of features that are, less common, but you'll see a whole set of examples, and also some points on resolution or how to address the challenges that arise. So my first example is mega menus, and here I'm showing a screenshot from the Royal Ontario Museum website. This is a website that our team recently redesigned. And as with many of our clients, we decided with them to create a mega menu. A mega menu being something where, the drop down on a menu item isn't just a set of links, but actually includes some content. So it gives you a taste for what's in that section of the menu. So the menu item that's being hovered over here that we can see a drop down for is the visit item. And here we see not just the list of sub items, but also a preview of the museum maps and tours section, location and parking. And then there's also the opening hours of the museum for the week, because we found that this is content that a lot of people are searching for when they're planning their visit. And then the issue with any mega menu is that what you're displaying in the menu is more than just links. And so in terms of the HTML that is expected, it's not just a list, right? There's actually more content here. And so it's important to enable keyboard accessibility. It's important that someone be able to use their keyboard to navigate through everything in this dropdown. And so that means that we need to group the content logically so that it supports a really clear tab order, meaning that as you tab through, it's kind of logical how things appear, that it doesn't like skip over to the opening hours, but puts everything kind of in an order that makes sense as you would kind of visually look at the content. And then it's also important that the role of each element is clearly identifiable. So here we've had to use ARIA roles in the content of the dropdown so that we show what each element is doing. So ARIA expanded, ARIA hidden, these are the roles that we need to apply. And then additional time also for setting up customizing those templates, adding in the ARIA roles, and then doing the testing, making sure that this gets tested at every step. And like with many mega menus, it might be flexible what goes into the mega menu. So the testing that shouldn't just include what is there in the mega menu on day one, but any other things that could be added through configuration to this menu. So I have another example. My next example is dropdowns in main navigation. So this example is the Georgia Center website. It's part of the University of Georgia, and this website was recently relaunched and includes a menu that's not a mega menu. There's not content in the menu, it's just links. But we do find that often with drop-down menus that there's this confusion about what the top level menu items are for. So I think it used to be that when you created a drop-down menu, it was expected that the top level items were always links. I'm pretty sure this was the case 15 years ago when I was developing websites. And now it seems like sometimes those top level elements are only there to function as a toggle. And so sometimes if content is linked to at that top level, people don't realize that it's there. So that's just a general usability issue. And then in terms of accessibility, the challenge with these top level items is that if they function as both a link and a toggle, so if you can click, for example, here we see the youth programs is one of the menu items, and that section, that drop down is currently open and visible. And if we have that open and visible, the top level item, we don't know, is that functioning as a link or is that just a toggle to open up the submenu? And so one easy workaround, which also might improve the usability, is to repeat the top level page as the first link in the dropdown. So this means in my youth programs example, youth programs is repeated as the first link in the dropdown. And so that just helps us clarify the role of each thing and doesn't require extra development. So my next example is from search. I think search is an area where clearly there's often a lot of custom development needed, a lot of extra work is put into search if we are looking at improving the search experience. And sometimes when we put custom development into something, it's a good signal that we might be introducing accessibility issues with our added features. And that's certainly the case in search. And one improvement that we're often looking at making is how to make the search seem faster, how to make changes to search filters seem more automatic and make the whole experience feel more dynamic. And my example here, the screenshot here is from the Georgia Gwinnett College website. And this is their site-wide search. And there are a set of filters on the left-hand side of the page. You can search by page type, article type, category, degree type, and we see the search results showing up on the right. And when we were developing this website, we decided to create a JavaScript feature so that when you select one of the filters, so for example, if you picked a particular page type, that the results on the right-hand side of the page would automatically update without refreshing the page. So it would make it faster for people to explore the content. But the problem is that a screen reader who is, a screen reader that's reading out the content of the page isn't automatically alerted that something has changed on the page. So it means that they won't necessarily be showing the user that the main results of the web of the search have changed. And that's something that we see visually on the page, but the screen reader doesn't automatically know about it. So the workaround or the solution is to use ARIA Live regions to announce that there are content changes and to make sure that the search results are accessible as they load so that the attention gets taken back to those results. And so I'm going to, and specifically, what happens on this page when that refresh happens, or when that reload of results happens through the JavaScript, the counter of the search results that kind of indicates how many results you see, that gets added to the skip to main link so that it's the first thing that gets read after the page is loaded. So let me just show you this example with a little video. And here you'll see right away that the screen reader is going to be interacting with the page.
Search by STUDENT. Student. G. URL link. About 836 results. Skip to main content. Student. Link. At about any student. Content selected. Menu pop up. Edit text. Main. ES. Campus. G. URL current link. About 278 results. Skip to main content. Campus. Apply. Button. Link. Image. Voiceover.
Okay, so that's just a snippet of this demo of the search. And what you saw was that, first of all, we searched for student. There were 800 some odd results. Then the search filter gets changed to campus. There's a new set of results. And as those results get updated, it's announced through the screen reader the new number of results, and the attention is taken back to the content. So my next example is a forms example. And this is interesting because I think we are really used to working with content management systems and other frameworks where forms are automatically created for us that have, generally accessibility best practices built in. You can configure the form and then the markup gets generated. We're not hand coding forms in 2025. But that being said, there is sometimes a desire from a design team or from a usability perspective to improve the interface for certain form elements. And one form element that's always particularly tricky is a multi-select. So this is, and you can see this in the screenshots here. This is an example of a form element where you can pick from a select list, but you can pick more than one. You can pick more than one thing from the select list. So, for example, there's a select state example here, and you can pick more than one state. And so the idea is that as a designer, the default that you would get if you just used HTML would be a little tricky to use. You have to select one thing, you have to scroll down, you have to, it's kind of hard to see what you've selected. And so sometimes we decide to use a JavaScript library to improve that user experience. And so these examples are using a JavaScript library called Select2. And we use this JavaScript library because it's adding ARIA support and keyboard navigation by default. And so it's already done some of the work for us to make sure that what we have as a behavior make sure that the focus is on the right thing, the right element at the right time, that the focus goes back to the appropriate element after a selection is made, and that the open and close states of the drop-down that we see, the select list, that gets announced correctly. So there's a lot of these details that Select2 takes care of for us. That being said, there's always different configurations, and we still need to add time for testing. So for this feature, it's something where picking the right library for the job can help us avoid accessibility issues, but we also still need to take the time to test because, yeah, like I said, depending on how exactly things have been configured, if you've added some extra help text, if you've changed the number of elements that can be added, these types of little tweaks in behavior can introduce issues. So we just need to test and see if any tweaks have to be made. And the testing here, using a keyboard, using a screen reader to test how it works. Those are the most important tests to do. I have a couple examples of modal lightbox interfaces. And I think that these have, a modal lightbox maybe is a little bit out of fashion compared to what it used to be. We used to always talk in accessibility sessions about slideshows. I think those are less common now for new designs. But we still often want to use some kind of a gallery feature when we have content that users might want to dig into a little bit more. So it's not like content that's essential content on the homepage that we're putting in a slideshow that we are, I think, as a design community moving away from a little bit. But the example I have here is interesting. It's, again, the Royal Ontario Museum website, and they have exhibitions. And those exhibitions might have a whole series of preview photos that a user might want to dig into to see what is this going to be like visually. And so it's added information that we want to make accessible. And we want to make sure that if you're using the gallery, that you can use the keyboard to get through it, and that tabbing navigation is going to work well. One common trap with something like this is that we have a whole series of images that the user can flip through. And we want to be able to tab through those with our keyboard. But sometimes what happens is that we get into a trap where the set of photos just loops and continues to loop and we can't escape. So it's really important to be testing that the escape key is going to work and get us out of the interface. Now there are JavaScript libraries that you could use for something like this, but our team has found that writing custom JavaScript is going to be easier because it makes it so that we're not introducing any of these issues with a loop, and just make sure that the focusable item is highlighted correctly, and that you can close the modal as well. And so when you're testing, you want to make sure that for example, yeah, you can close it, you can loop through with your keyboard, that the focus is on the right thing, and that the escape key is working. So that's a short checklist of things to test. Other times with a similar interface, you might want to use a library. So here's another example of something quite similar. This is a looping slider. So the screenshot here is showing a website. This is a website for a school district, like a K through 12 elementary, secondary school district. It's a screenshot from a French website, but to translate the title, it says, "Join our community." And there's all these nice photos from their schools. And you can flip through the photos using arrows, and you can also tab through them. And it's something where we're using the swiper library because the interface on mobile allows you to swipe through. So that's why we're using that. And users need to be able to navigate away from the slider, even though it's a looping slider. And so we use Swiper.js, which is a library that does a fine job of accessibility, but the fact that we are configuring this as a looping slider did make it not accessible when we set this up. So that little change in configuration of how we're using the library created a keyboard trap where users did end up being endlessly stuck in the loop, and could never exit the slider, which is a pretty terrible user experience. So to fix this, we use a custom JavaScript function to control which elements inside the slider receive the focus. And we set a tab index of -1 on all the non-visible slides to remove it from that set of those in view. The JavaScript can detect the changes to the swiper's event listeners, which means that we can update focusable elements in real time. And this means that only the visible slides are keyboard reachable. And then the user can tab forward to content outside the slider if they want, but they can also escape and get out of that loop. So this required using a library, but also making some specific customizations, and took a little bit of extra work than one might expect. We often think of accessibility issues in terms of what's the experience that we're delivering the day that we launch a website. Oh, it's accessible, great. But I think as all of us probably are aware of here, because you're attending these webinars, you're kind of in the know, it's really important to provide tools for content editors to be able to create accessible content over time and maintain it over time. So just as an aside, not one of the examples here, but on all of our Drupal projects, we love using the editorially module. It's very helpful for allowing content editors to test that their own content is accessible. This example that I'm showing right now is for a specific issue that can arise when you're using icons in your content. So the example that I have, the screenshot, is actually from a WordPress website for the University of Georgia Center. And it's their editing interface that they have. And it's specifically showing editing a restaurant menu. And on this restaurant menu, there are icons, and the icons are content. And that means that there's nothing else visible on the page that's, there's nothing else visible on the page. It's the icon that's really telling you important information. And so the content editor is able to create this area hidden element through the interface, and they can specifically select that the text that they can add as a replacement for the icon is for screen readers only. And so this kind of tweak to the content editor interface allows you to create content that's more accessible and then to maintain that over time. And it gives quite a bit of flexibility to the content editor as long as they're getting a little bit of training about how to use this feature. I have a few examples of search because I think search is something that comes up often. Specifically, I already showed one example of search, but this one is for a search result showing up for a map feature. So this example is from a website called bonjourquebec.com. It's a travel website. So you can see the screenshot here. It is showing search results if you're searching for what to do in a certain region of Quebec. And their search results show up by default as text. So the idea is that we don't assume that users can interact with the map. The map search results add a lot of complexity. And so the default is something more accessible. It's a set of cards that show the tourism items that you might be looking for in the region you've searched for. Then if a user decides that they want to dig deeper, they can then go to the map option, but the search results are still available as text in that interface as well. So we have all the information about each search listing, which then also shows the address of each item. But we can also add the enhancement of showing the results on a map. So that kind of progressive enhancement and making a map option available, but not throwing users into it without telling them what it is. That is a simple improvement that you can make to improve accessibility. My last example is a feature that I think could be popular maybe amongst developers that are looking to add a fun thing to their website. This is the dark mode feature, and specifically for if you're using the Drupal CMS, there's Drupal's dark mode JS module, and it makes it really easy to add this dark mode toggle on your website. So it seems like, oh, that would be fun feature to try. So what you see in the screenshots here, it's some demo recipe content, and we see two versions of it, one with the dark mode enabled, so there's a dark background, and one with the default styles, which is a light background. The problem that this introduces is, first of all, it adds a lot of combinations of colors on your website that you then would have to go and test for accessibility. You'd have to do the contrast testing that you typically do with, text on a background color. It also ignores that many users prefer to use their own tools for things like this. They might have settings in their own browser, and it kind of like takes responsibility back from the user for this type of decision, which in and of itself is a bit problematic. And so I think when we're planning features for a website, sometimes it's tempting to just say, oh yeah, we'll add this feature there. It's easy to add a module, or it's easy to add a plugin. We can just set this up, but it ignores the accessibility issues that this could introduce. And it ignores that extra overhead of testing that then takes time away from other things that you need to focus on that are probably a higher priority or could be a higher priority. So I've shown some examples. I wanted to have a few takeaways to kind of summarize what we've seen. First of all, adding accessibility review to the discovery process is really important. If we only plan for accessibility as part of QA and testing, we're going to be redoing a lot of work and it's going to be less efficient. So taking even a short amount of time in discovery is going to pay off in the long run for your project. Using a design system or a more product mindset to prevent accessibility bugs from surfacing is a good way to avoid accessibility issues, especially on projects where you have multiple websites or multiple teams and you really have to get everyone on the same page. So this usually involves training up your design team on accessibility and making sure that that's part of the process of creating your style guide or creating a design system or creating a library of reusable components. Testing should always be part of those conversations. And then doing testing with assistive technology users. So it's not something that I've really described in this presentation, but we can see how some of the features like the search or like the sliders, it's going to be clear what would create a usable interface if we actually involve real users. But for all of these, I've shown testing with, or I've talked about testing with a keyboard, I've talked about testing with a screen reader, adding users that actually use assistive technologies into that mix is going to even increase the quality of the results. So as next steps, if you're looking for something a little bit more in-depth, I have a link here to an accessibility challenges blog post that goes along with this presentation. So you can see some of these screenshots and get a little bit more in-depth information into the solutions. I also wanted to let you know that my team is organizing an in-person event in New York City on November 21st with talks like this one. And you're also more than welcome to get in touch with me about anything I've presented on, Suzanne at evolvingweb.com. And you can also add me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Suzanne Dergacheva.
Great. Thank you so much. This was awesome. I loved seeing all the different examples you had of different components you can build, and especially components that aren't native HTML, where you had to add ARIA to actually make the functionality work. It's really cool to see a lot of examples like that, especially the different search examples you talked about. So that was super cool. So thank you so much for coming and doing that. So we have a couple questions for you. All right, so the first question for you, Suzanne, is what websites do you use to keep up to date with implementing ARIA in your components? Like, do you have particular websites you use to read up on the best way to do that?
That's such a great question. At the moment, I'm now relying on my team to do this. So we have, luckily, I have 2 solutions architects I work with in WordPress and Drupal. And so I'm not actually staying up to date with anything. I would love to know what other people are using.
Yeah, definitely. I know the WAI, there's a bunch of ARIA websites you can use. There's something called I think it's called the APG, the must be ARIA practice guidelines. Of course, I could be completely wrong with what that stands for, but I know that website has a bunch of examples of ways to implement ARIA and things like that when you're building like a combo box or this disclosure navigation, like the drop down you were showing. So yeah, it's pretty cool. All right, next question is, which accessibility testing tools do either you or your team use to ensure accessibility? Like, do you use any kind of browser extensions to test things? I know you use screen readers and things like that. So can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we use a real mix. There's a Axe, which I know is really common. We've used in the past Site Improve. We're actively using that with some of our clients who use that as a service, but they also have a browser testing tool. We also use Dubbot, which is good for more of the like, you want to assess your whole site. They have some really powerful tools that kind of show more tracking progress over time of how you're doing. And so it's always a suite of tools that we end up using for the automated testing part.
Nice. So I assume you probably find different issues in every single testing, automated testing tool in the browser, I'm assuming. Like I know different ones will pick up different things. So it's always important to test in a bunch of different ones to pick up as much issues as you can. So it's good
Yeah,
to
and
know.
I think our team tends to have like, we have a QA, we have developers, and they tend to use different tools, which is a good thing because they are making sure that they're flagging different things at different points in the process.
All right, next question. Have you come across an instance where an existing library is not accessible out of the box? And what have you done to ensure accessibility in this case? I know you brought up a couple, but could you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, so the one that I showed, I mean, I think that it's rare to have a library that would just be accessibility proof, like that it wouldn't let you create any issues because like a JavaScript library by its nature, it's something that you implement often by putting classes into your HTML, for example, and you could add those to any number of different HTML elements. So I do think that any library that you add, you could create something not accessible with it. So you always have to build that testing time. And I think part of the strategy I would recommend is finding tools that work. And I've shown a couple, but using the same ones and developing an expertise in what works and what doesn't with the ones that you're using, so that you know what to test for, so that you know how to use them, so that you know any weaknesses that they have. That's probably more important than the specific libraries that you pick, is just knowing how to use them and knowing what their limitations are.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, and that's really good advice. All right, next question is, do you prefer to use existing libraries or write your own JavaScript for interactive functionality? So kind of carrying on from the last question.
Yeah, I'm always asking this question when we've launched a project. I tend to be the one on the team who's like, I'm writing the case study, and I'm like, okay, tell me all the insider intel into everything that's been created. And I find that we kind of are going back to basics sometimes of just using JavaScript and not using libraries in some cases. And I think, again, that's because of the control that it gives, of not introducing an issue to start with. So the example I showed was with the Royal Ontario Museum, the exhibition modal that's just created with JavaScript. And I think, again, it's a choice that you're making because you're trying to create it to be accessible, but it also depends on who's going to be maintaining that over time. So if you are, let's say you are an end user organization, you're a university, you're a government, you're hiring an agency to come in and build your website, if they build everything from scratch, that might make it harder in the long run to maintain, because if what they've done is complicated, maybe they didn't write documentation and you don't know how to modify it. So that could be something that kind of pushes you more in favor of using a library if it's well supported. On the flip side, if you use a library that's really complicated and kind of locks you into a solution, it can be less flexible. So I do think that the decision kind of has to come down to like, is it a few lines of custom code that's going to save you from a really big, heavy library? Then the short bit of custom code is probably better. But also think about who's going to be making updates to it in the future.
Yeah, I think that's really, really good advice. It's better. Like, I know I like to write custom solutions if I can, but yeah, depending on who is going to be maintaining it after you roll off the project, it's important to keep that in mind as well. So it's complicated, but yeah, that's the way to do it.
And maybe sometimes the answer is just, maybe you don't need to add that extra bit of JavaScript in your project. Maybe it's not worth the cost of ownership. So that's sort of the other answer.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So we have one more question for you. What feature on a website is the most challenging? Mega menus, image galleries, something else?
I think for sure it's it's a search, but specifically a map or like some kind of data visualization. Like it's like a regular search or like even an advanced search with a set of filters, like that's quite standard, and there's quite a few things you can test, and you can build something that feels like you're following the best practices and you're creating a great experience. But as soon as you open something up to being like, okay, we're going to display these 800 search results on a map, and then the map is going to have different layers, that's when I start to lose confidence that what we're creating is accessible. It feels like such a big challenge to create something that's really providing a good experience via screen reader, or like it feels like there's always something that gets lost, and you can really try hard on enhancing the text version of search results, but it's hard to build in the same value. So I would say that's probably the hardest thing that our team has encountered.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was going to say data visualizations, making those accessible seems like it would be really complicated too. I know I've had to do it before, and yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. So
you can provide the raw data, of course, but that always feels like such a cop out of like, okay, well, use it yourself and see how you would want to parse the information. But it feels like that's not really doing it justice. So
yeah, I agree with that. Like making sure the experience would be a good experience for everybody is a good thing to test as well. So yeah, that's very, very important. So yeah, thank you so much, Suzanne, for coming and talking to us all about accessibility and the components that you've built at Evolving Web. That was very, very interesting, and I really learned a lot. So thank you so much. I just have a couple more slides to go through to wrap up the talk. And yeah, so we're always looking for speakers and new voices in the accessibility community. We make a conscious effort to include marginalized groups in tech in our speaker lineup. If you are interested, please reach out to us at team@A11yTalks.com. For those with IAAP certifications, A11yTalks speakers and attendees receive professional development credits, CAECs, through IAAP for your continuing education. We'd love your feedback on what we are doing well and what we can do better. Go to A11yTalks.com/feedback to share your positive and or less than positive feedback. We value your input. To follow us, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. You're watching this on YouTube right now, so smash that subscribe button and never miss a talk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Blue Sky, and Mastodon. And we have all these links on our website, and most of them are either Accessibility Talks or A11yTalks. Thank you so much for attending, and we'll see you next time.